right now, as you sit there listening to this, you actually have iron flowing through your blood.
Hmm.
But, and this is the crazy part, that iron wasn't created on Earth. I mean, the extreme heat required to forge iron could only be generated by the violent, explosive death of a massive star, billions of years ago.
Hmm.
So you are, quite literally, a walking graveyard of cosmic history.
Yeah, it's an incredible thought. When you look at your own hand, you're literally looking at repurposed stardust.
Right.
And mapping out exactly how we got from a silent, empty void to you, right here, carrying that stardust, is probably the ultimate intellectual challenge.
It really is. So welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is wildly ambitious. We are looking at how brilliant minds attempt to summarize the history of absolutely everything from the Big Bang to, well, whatever comes next for humanity.
It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah. And to do this, we're synthesizing an incredible stack of sources for you. We've got the Big History Educational Framework, Yuval Noah Harari's blockbuster book Sapiens, Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything.
A class.
Oh, totally. Plus a massive 5,000-year visual timeline of civilizations from useful charts, and even the surreal viral YouTube videos of musician and animator Bill Wirtz.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin with the history of literally everything?
Well, to understand the human story, you first have to understand the stage it's set on, right? This is where the concept of big history comes in. It's this interdisciplinary approach that views history through 8 major thresholds of increasing complexity.
Okay.
And naturally, threshold 1 is the Big Bang, which happened roughly 13.8 billion years ago.
But the sources point out something here that it always just breaks my brain. The Big Bang didn't just create space, it created time.
Yes.
But how can there be no before? I just can't visualize that.
You kind of have to change how you think about what time actually is. Time is essentially a measurement of change, of matter moving through space.
Right.
So without space and without matter to move through it, the whole metric of time literally has no physical meaning. It's like asking what is north of the North Pole.
Oh, wow. The concept just doesn't apply. There is no north.
Okay, so matter and space just explode into existence. But it wasn't instantly stars and planets, right? It was mostly just like a dark balloon expanding with the simplest stuff imaginable.
Exactly. For about 380,000 years, the universe was just incredibly hot and chaotic. Once it cooled down enough, the very simplest atoms formed, which were hydrogen and helium.
Just those two.
Just those two. And honestly, for a very long time, that was the entire periodic table, just vast, dark clouds of hydrogen and helium gas.
Which, sounds a little underwhelming, though I did read a wild fact recently, if you remember tuning old analog televisions and seeing that static on empty channels.
Oh yeah, the black and white snow.
Yeah. About 1% of that visual noise is actually leftover microwave radiation from the Big Bang hitting the antenna.
See, that is a perfect example of cosmic history just bleeding into everyday life. Now, what's fascinating here is threshold 3, which is the creation of new chemical elements. Because those dark clouds of gas eventually collapsed under their own gravity, and that lit up the first stars. But a universe of just hydrogen and helium still can't make rocks, or water, or biology. You need heavier elements.
And this is where that iron in our blood comes in.
Yes, exactly. Those first-generation stars acted as giant cosmic pressure cookers. When they eventually ran out of fuel, they collapsed and died in massive supernova explosions.
So they basically blew themselves apart.
Right. And the sheer, unfathomable heat and pressure of those stellar deaths, that's what forged the heavier, more complex atoms. Carbon, oxygen, calcium, iron. Without those dead stars, the building blocks for planets simply do not exist.
It's basically a massive cosmic recycling program. Which brings us to thresholds 4 and 5, where our solar system forms about 4.5 billion years ago. The sources talk about Earth forming through accretion, which is basically space dust snowballing into a planet.
Well, snowballing makes it sound gentle, but accretion was a violently explosive process. Yeah, immense rocks colliding, melting, fusing over millions of years. But out of all that violence, we eventually got something stable enough to hold liquid water.
Which is crazy because the water was already there, right?
It was. In fact, isotopic tracking suggests that up to half the water on Earth, literally the water you drink today, actually predates the birth of our sun.
That's insane.
Yeah, it floated around as interstellar ice before our solar system even formed.
That is just staggering to think about. Okay, so we have this watery rock, and about 3 billion years ago, deep in the ocean near these volcanic vents, chemical reactions kick off the first single-celled organisms. Life begins. But it feels like a massive leap to go from, a single cell floating in the dark to Homo sapiens building the pyramids and launching satellites. What actually bridges that gap?
Well, that is big history's sixth threshold, which they call collective learning. And what's interesting is this maps directly onto the first major paradigm shift in Yuval Noah Harari's book, Sapiens.
Cognitive revolution.
Exactly. Harari says about 70,000 years ago, Homo sapiens developed advanced language.
I get that language is a big deal, obviously, but Harari takes it a step further, right? He says it wasn't just talking about, like, rivers and lions, but talking about things that aren't even there.
Yeah, that is the crucial mechanism. Harari introduces this concept of shared fictions. Think about a corporation or human rights or money.
Right, because you can't point to those in nature.
Exactly. You cannot physically touch a corporation. You can't put human rights in a box. They exist solely because millions of humans collectively agree to believe in the exact same story.
It's almost like operating software for society. If two humans have the currency software installed in their brains, they can trade a meaningless piece of green paper for actual food.
Yeah.
Without that software, it's literally just paper.
That is a brilliant analogy. And that software allowed humans to cooperate in unprecedented numbers. I mean, you can only get maybe 150 chimpanzees to cooperate before the social hierarchy breaks down into violence. But through shared fictions, Homo sapiens could organize thousands and eventually billions of total strangers.
But Harari is also quick to point out that this software has major bugs, because the same collective imagination that allows us to, build global trade networks also enables us to wage systemic war, oppress groups based on completely fabricated social hierarchies, and exploit our environment to the point of collapse.
The duality is really profound. And that drive to extract more from our environment leads right into Harari's second major shift, which happened about 10,000 years ago, and that's the agricultural revolution.
Right.
When humans transitioned from being nomadic hunter-gatherers to settled farmers domesticating wheat, rice, animals.
Okay, I have to jump in here, because growing up, you're taught that agriculture was the ultimate human upgrade. Wait, wasn't farming the ultimate upgrade? A move from desperately struggling to survive in the wild to, like, comfortable living, surplus food, and the birth of modern civilization.
That's the standard narrative, yeah.
But Harari views farming as history's biggest fraud.
He really does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Harari views the agricultural revolution as a trap.
A trap.
Yes. On a species level, sure, farming produced a massive food surplus, and that surplus allowed for exploding populations, permanent cities, and complex economies. But for the individual human working the field, it was an absolute disaster.
Wait, but why wouldn't humans just go back to foraging once they realized farming was back-breaking work from dawn to dusk?
Because of the population trap. Imagine a tribe of 50 foragers. They settle down, start farming wheat, and suddenly they have enough calories to support 200 people.
Okay, that sounds like a win.
Right, but farming is highly vulnerable to weather and disease. So if a drought hits, those 200 people can't just drop their hoes and revert to hunting and gathering. The local ecosystem simply cannot sustain 200 foragers.
Oh, I see.
They are completely trapped. They have to work even harder, dig irrigation ditches, and fiercely defend their land just to survive.
So they became prisoners of their own success.
Exactly.
Not to mention, relying heavily on just a few crops like wheat or rice meant their diet was far less nutritious than the varied diet of a hunter-gatherer. And once you have land and, like a grain silo, you have to invent land ownership, which naturally creates extreme inequality, rigid social hierarchies, and eventually slavery.
Yeah, it's a compelling argument that the wheat actually domesticated us, rather than the other way around.
Wow.
However, we should make it clear that scholars do critique Harari for kind of romanticizing the past.
How so?
Anthropological records show that pre-agricultural hunter-gatherers didn't exactly live in this egalitarian, peaceful paradise. I mean, there's plenty of skeletal evidence of warfare and brutality long before farming was invented.
Right. History is messy. But whether it was a trap or a triumph, that human drive to master our surroundings ultimately sets the stage for big history's eighth threshold and Harari's third major shift, which is the scientific revolution.
Starting around the 16th century.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting. Because usually when we picture scientific progress, we imagine this pristine, majestic march of geniuses elegantly uncovering the truth.
And that is exactly where Bill Bryson's book, A Short History of Nearly Everything, completely shatters the illusion. He exposes the actual mechanism of scientific discovery.
It's pretty wild.
It's not a majestic march at all. It's driven by brilliant but deeply flawed, petty, and sometimes downright bizarre humans.
Take Isaac Newton,
Yeah,
widely considered one of the greatest minds ever.
absolutely.
But Bryson reveals that when Newton published his groundbreaking work, the Principia, he intentionally wrote it to be as dense and impenetrable as possible.
Why would he do that?
The reason? He just didn't want amateur mathematicians to understand it and bother him with questions.
That is hilarious. It was basically weaponized academic gatekeeping.
Seriously.
And the story of how that book even got published is completely absurd. Edmund Halley of Halley's Comet fame, he had to pay for the Principia out of his own pocket because the prestigious Royal Society had run out of money.
And do you know why they were broke?
Why?
Because they blew their entire annual budget publishing this expensive, massive flop of a book called The History of Fishes.
Oh, no.
It was so bad that when it came time to pay Halley his regular salary, the Royal Society couldn't give him cash. They actually paid him in leftover copies of The History of Fishes.
Just imagine doing world-changing astronomical work and your employer hands you a stack of unsold fish books on payday.
It's unbelievable.
But, Bryson also highlights how toxic and dark these rivalries could get. He profiles a 19th century paleontologist named Gideon Mantell who made incredible discoveries regarding dinosaur fossils. But Mantell was relentlessly discredited by a brilliant, ruthless rival named Richard Owen.
Owen's actually the guy who coined the word dinosaur.
Yeah, he is. But their rivalry didn't end with, polite scientific debate. Mantell suffered a horrible carriage accident that left him with a severely deformed spine and in constant agony.
Yeah, and he eventually died from an opium overdose just to escape the pain.
Right. And what did Owen do? He had a piece of Mantell's deformed spine surgically removed, pickled in a jar, and put on display in a museum.
That is just remarkably grim. And then Bryson delves into the downright tragic irony of certain inventors, like Thomas Midgley Jr. He was a chemist who holds the terrible distinction of inventing both leaded gasoline and CFCs.
Right, chlorofluorocarbons. He invented them to be a safe, non-flammable refrigerant, completely unaware that the mechanism of how CFCs interact with the upper atmosphere meant they literally chewed a massive hole in the Earth's ozone layer.
Exactly. Midgley's inventions had catastrophic environmental impacts, but later in life he contracted polio and lost the use of his legs.
Oh, wow.
And being a tinkerer, he designed this complex system of ropes and pulleys to lift himself out of bed. Tragically, he became entangled in his own invention and accidentally strangled himself to death.
It's so sad. But what Bryson illustrates is that science is just a chaotic, serendipitous stumble forward. But while Bryson's book is a masterpiece, critics often point out a major blind spot, which is that it's incredibly Eurocentric. It heavily focuses on Western men.
Right. If we want a true history of everything, we have to pull back and look at the whole globe simultaneously.
And this is where the 5,000-year visual timeline from useful charts becomes absolutely essential. A linear narrative often tricks us into thinking history happens in a sequence, but when you look at a visual representation of all global civilizations stacked side by side, long-held historical myths just evaporate.
Like, if you're listening to this in North America or Europe, you're probably taught about the Dark Ages. The idea that after Rome fell, the lights basically went out for humanity and everyone lived in ignorant squalor.
But the timeline shows that the Dark Ages really only applied to a fractured Europe. Look just a bit to the east, and the Islamic Golden Age was flourishing, making massive leaps in algebra, medicine, astronomy. In China, the Tang and Song dynasties were busy inventing gunpowder, the magnetic compass, the printing press. You see massive, sophisticated societies like the Aksumite Empire in East Africa or the Mississippian culture in North America completely thriving while Europe was struggling.
When you look at it that way, you also get this overwhelming feeling of what poets call Ozymandian transience, named after Percy Shelley's famous poem about a shattered statue in the desert.
Oh, right.
It's this chilling realization that no matter how mighty an empire builds its monuments, they all eventually crumble to dust. You trace the thick line of an unstoppable power like the Olmecs and just watch it slowly thin out and vanish.
But there's a problem with visualizing all this. A timeline on a page is static. How do you actually convey the sheer chaotic speed and simultaneity of history to a modern brain?
It's tough.
Someone actually solved this, and bizarrely, it wasn't a historian.
Nope, it was a surrealist musician on YouTube, Bill Wirtz.
Yes.
His viral video, History of the Entire World, I guess, is honestly a masterclass in modern communication.
Wirtz managed to compress everything we've talked about from the Big Bang all the way to the near future into a single 20-minute video. And he did it using absurdist, fast-paced humor, deadpan delivery, and these extremely catchy 5-second jazz pop musical interludes.
It feels like a chaotic internet meme, but it is deeply, deeply researched. Word succeeds because his rapid-fire format allows him to visually weave together non-Western history, giving proper weight to empires in China, Persia, and India.
And he tackles incredibly complex social concepts brilliantly. For instance, the sudden emergence and splintering of major world religions like Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam.
Right. Usually textbooks are so dry about that.
Traditional textbooks often frame these as rigid divine edicts. Wirtz frames them as rapidly spreading ideas, almost like cultural memes that evolve, branch off, and compete for territory over time. It's a highly sophisticated sociological point disguised as internet art.
The guy is just wonderfully eccentric. Like when he won a Shorty Award for his innovative style, he walked up to the microphone and his entire acceptance speech was just 2 words. Thank you.
That's it.
Yep. Then he just walked off.
That perfectly matches his minimalist aesthetic. But ultimately, what Wirtz, Useful Charts, Bryson, Harari, and Big History all do is force us to look forward. We've mapped out the past up to our digital present. Where is this trajectory taking us?
Well, our sources offer 2 very different flavors of existential dread. On one hand, you have Harari warning about the technological future. He argues we are on the brink of a new revolution driven by biotechnology and artificial intelligence.
Because for all of history, human development has been constrained by our biology. But Harari points out that with genetic engineering and AI, we might soon transcend those biological limits. We won't just be upgrading our iPhones, we will be upgrading the user.
We could engineer life itself.
Exactly.
But the sociological implications of that are terrifying. I mean, if only the ultra-wealthy can afford to fundamentally upgrade their bodies, their cognitive abilities, or their lifespans,
Right.
we wouldn't just have economic inequality anymore.
No, it would be much deeper.
We could see the creation of entirely different biological castes, like speciation driven by wealth.
That is the technological peril. But then Bill Bryson reminds us of the geological peril, the sheer fragility of our rock floating in space.
Oh, man.
He points out that the supervolcano sitting right underneath Yellowstone National Park in the U.S. is historically overdue for an eruption by about 30,000 years.
And the mechanics of an eruption that size wouldn't just be a local problem for tourists. The volume of ash ejected into the atmosphere would block out the sun globally.
Yeah.
Temperatures would plummet, agriculture would fail worldwide, and it would slowly wipe out most life on Earth through starvation.
Which is bleak. And this raises an important question. How do we actually live with this knowledge? How do you hold the awareness of both our potential for technological self-destruction and our total geological vulnerability without just giving in to despair?
Bryson offers a perspective that I actually find incredibly comforting. The logical takeaway isn't panic, it's profound appreciation. He writes about the math of your specific existence. Out of all the billions of years of chaotic history, the asteroid strikes, the famines, the wars, the plagues, not one of your pertinent ancestors was squashed, devoured, drowned, starved, or stranded before passing on their genetic material.
It's true. Every single one of them survived long enough to deliver a tiny charge of genetic material to the right partner at the exact right moment to eventually result in you. You are the apex of an unbroken chain of survivors stretching back to those ocean vents 3 billion years ago.
So what does this all mean? Whether we are using the 8 thresholds of big history, Harari's 3 revolutions, or a surreal jazz pop YouTube video, it shows that humanity is driven by a fundamental need to contextualize our brief existence. We desperately want to know the mechanics of how we got here.
And that search for context is evolving. If we think back to Big History's Threshold 6 collective learning, where Homo sapiens use language to share ideas, it makes you wonder what the next threshold looks like.
What do you mean?
What if we are currently standing on the verge of Threshold 9? With the internet, artificial intelligence, and the instant digital recording of all human knowledge, perhaps we aren't just communicating with each other anymore.
Wow.
As we integrate globally through our devices and algorithms, perhaps we are slowly shedding our individual perspectives to become a single planetary collective consciousness, a globally integrated mind.
That is an incredible thought to leave on. A global mind trying to understand its own origin story. So To you listening, keep exploring, keep asking those big questions, and dig into the how and why behind the facts. Because even if you can't hold the entire 13.8 billion year history of the universe in your head at once, the simple act of trying connects you to every star, every ancestor, and every civilization that came before you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.